And Helene.
David and Helene, and we are the hosts for this evening. And so, is there anybody else we have to let in?
Sunny.
I think Sunny. I think Sunny's in.
Sunny, are you in?
Yeah.
Yeah, Asha here. Good morning.
Okay.
It's our
So,
good morning just now from
then-
Bombay.
Oh,
so
Bombay.
okay, great, great.
Yeah,
So
yeah, yeah.
tonight is the we're on the human miracle, the 12 building blocks, and tonight is number 10 of 52, which is emotional well-being part 2, and it's about going from de-stressing to de going from distress to de-stress, which is very, very powerful. So tonight, Mynoo is going to show us how we can choose to walk the path so that with every step of emotional distress can be dissolved and our tissues. Oh, what happened here?
It got dissolved from your phone.
It got dissolved. It got dissolved from my reading it to you guys. So yes. So with so that the with every step, your emotional distress dissolves and your tissues start to de-stress, reclaiming their vibrant vitality and restoring their lightness of being. And as a stress consultant for so many years, this is right up my alley, and I know Helene,
My alley too.
your alley too. So I'm very excited to hear more what Mynoo has to share with us tonight. So welcome, Mynoo.
Thank you, David and Helene. Both David and Helene have been a stand for making a meaningful contribution in building a positive world, supporting people to think positive wherever they are in every walk of life, in every situation. So thank you so much, David and Helene. Now, this particular program is a little bit different than what I usually do on a Thursday evening. So you are, both of you, in your own way, represent an archetype of people around the world. So as I'm talking, as I'm presenting, if there are questions that arise, then you can actually ask those questions. Okay. And if I'm in a flow, I will say, okay, I will address it when there's a logical break point. Okay.
Great.
So, yes. And then towards the end, you summarize what you are left with from everything that I would have shared.
Great.
Okay. Thank you. So let's begin. So the human miracle, and this is very much a part of the 12 building blocks that make up our human body. And this one's focusing on emotional well-being. There are 3 parts to emotional well-being. This is the second part. And like David introduced or you read, it is about moving from emotional distress to de-stressing. So let's look at some dictionary definitions themselves so that we really get on the same page about what we are talking about here. And at a conscious level, our mind understands and accepts that this is the journey that we are looking at achieving here. Distress means extreme anxiety, sorrow, or pain. And de-stress is to relax your body or mind. And as a result, you stop feeling the effects of stress. So what we're talking about here, and that's why it's a building block, where emotional distress, where you have that experience on account of emotions, which causes extreme anxiety, sorrow, or pain, is going to be dissolved so that your cells release the load and you start to relax at a body level, at a mind level. And whatever effects you may have of stress simply go away. And the way I'm going to give you access to that, as I'm guided to share this body of work is through 7 pathways. And a pathway is a way of achieving a specified result or a course of action. And that's what we're going to be looking at. So let's look at the first pathway. And actually, even before we go into the first pathway, let's understand emotional itself. So we talk about full spectrum in everything that I do. At a full spectrum level, we have 6 cylinders: physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, social, and environmental. Physical is what you can touch, feel, see, and mental is to do with your thoughts, thinking. And emotional is to do with your feelings. Spiritual is the connection you have to your own spirit. And the connection to your own spirit is such that it brings an end to duality. So you are in the spiritedness of you. Social is to do with the dynamics in relationships, and environment is the terrain within you and the terrain around you and the terrain in which we all coexist, which is the planet itself. We are focusing right now on the emotional. So let's look at the first pathway to take you from a state of distress to de-stress. And the first pathway is the digestion process. The digestion process. So some of you may have heard me talk about this, that, your colon, your gut, in fact, is designed for you to digest emotional distress. And emotional, what you may also have read in Louise Hay's work, and many people talk about it, and I also certainly talk about this, which is any physical ailments often is rooted in an emotional distress. Emotional distress themselves lodge themselves at an organ level. So different organs are impacted by different emotions. So the digestion process is the first pathway to move from distress to de-stressing. Let's look at what is the digestion process itself. Digestion is a 3-part process. You ingest, you absorb, and you excrete. So when you ingest, in the case of emotions, you've ingested an experience that you might have had that impacted you at an emotional level. And what happens is, depending on what that impact is, good, bad, ugly, beautiful, life goes on and you move forward with life in whichever way. You may remain sad, or you may be euphoric, or you may just carry on with life. But very rarely do we proactively engage in completing the digestion process when we've had an emotional impact. So as a result, stuff remains. Last week we talked about emotional well-being. That was part 1. And that was all about the issues in your tissues, to understand the 7 issues in your tissues. So what happens is, when you just move on, when you have an emotional reaction to any experience, then what happens is issues remain in your tissues. And that has a direct impact on, your level of stress. And your level of stress, depending on how it has impacted you emotionally, could actually be distress. And that distress lodges itself in any organ that is weakened. And you have a whole variety of, physical ailments that start to show up. So when you have, what I'm saying here, a pathway to go from emotional stress to emotional de-stress, the pathway basically is, when you have an emotional response or an emotional reaction to anything, pause, understand what is there for me to absorb from this experience. And it could be a learning, it could be an insight, it could be an action that becomes clear to you. Don't move forward until you have absorbed it. Once you've absorbed it, give permission to your cells to excrete the rest. You don't have to engage with what you are excreting. Often what happens is we have an emotional reaction to something and we spend ad nauseum engaging with what is it that caused that emotional upset. That's like you're engaging over and over with what is it that you're excreting. Think about it. You know, if you just think about food and the digestion process to do with food, you ingest it and then it goes through your digestive tract. And in the process of going through your digestive tract, it goes into your gut, and then your gut, absorbs nutrients and sends them to the different organs that different parts of the gut are connected with. And the rest is excreted. You don't focus your attention on what it is that you're excreting. And if you did, then there would be so much energy given to toxification of your cells, which is exactly what happens when it is to do with emotional distress. Something happens, boom, you're affected emotionally, and we start engaging with what caused it, where did it come from, and whole variety of things that you really wish to excrete. So all that is required to occur when an emotional issue occurs and you feel your emotional well-being is challenged or out of integrity or destabilized in any way, all that is called to do is to simply look at what's there for me to absorb from this. What's that nutrient, which could be an insight, an illumination of some kind, some revelation, some clarity that you're meant to get, and then the rest is simply meant to be excreted. And your body will do the rest. You don't have to worry about it. Now, I have a very dear friend, and many of you have seen her here on Beyond Meditation or on the Pearls of Wisdom or the Human Miracle. Her name is Mary Malloy, and she has a system called the biodynamic system of medicine. And she very specifically works with a sound stethoscope that is connected to your gut. And she uses the stethoscope to see where your gut may be stuck. And that's how she diagnoses that you have an emotional distress. And then she will basically be with you, either doing a Reiki or just simply energetically removing vibrations or talking to you, like a psychotherapist would, until she hears the sound in your gut change. And you actually hear it. It literally, the gut might be stuck and it will be tuck, 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 tuck. And then it goes into this gurgling sound all of a sudden. That's when you know that emotional distress is now released. So I have used the digestion process very proactively. I do the digestion process like in the form of a retreat. The first time I did it, it took me nearly 21 days of just engaging every day in those 21 days, taking one incident from my life at a time and really going through what's there for me what's that nutrient I'm meant to absorb from this. And then I would release the rest. And then I kept doing it. Now, once I've done it so many times, now when I do it, I don't need to do it for more than 3 days, this digestion process. And really so I'll give you an example of how I work with this. So some of you have heard me talk about my first marriage and how there was domestic violence from, almost the first month that I got married, there was the domestic violence began, and I remained married for 10 years. And I've processed so much out of my system from this. And yet, when I began this process, I said to my own intuition, show me, what am I to work on? Let me make a short list of what I need to work on in terms of emotional distress. And this was one of the first things that came on the list. So when I went into it and I said, okay, what's there for me to get? What's like that nourishment that I am to absorb from this, from the emotion? So it was nothing to do with the relationship. It was to do with, well, however, that the emotion of being in that relationship, subject to that kind of treatment, the distress that it left behind in my cells. So I went into, okay, so what's the distress that, no, it wasn't what's the distress, what's there for me to absorb from the emotional distress from that relationship? What's the nutrient? What's the nourishment? And it was in that process that I saw really clearly that what was my role in allowing for this to occur for 10 years.
So
So it was
Mynoo,
like,
can I say one thing?
yes.
So what I'm hearing is that it's really a twofold process. Number one is you're interested in doing whatever you need to do in the moment to handle the stress or distress in the moment, and at the same time you're looking for what is it, what is recurring. So how can you handle something like that so that and create it to where it doesn't happen again?
And that's the consequence of doing it this way. Even though you're not consciously thinking that you're doing that, but that becomes the consequence of it. The second part that you talked about, that is a direct consequence of it. So the benefits are actually multifold.
Mm-hmm.
Once you've done it once, so I feel, it is literally like take stock of what's going on in your life. Take stock of, all the positive things that you can be grateful for. I say to people, at least once a year, a part of your own, up-leveling, take stock of what is it that remains to be digested from any emotional distress that you might have experienced.
Thank you.
Okay. So for me, what I saw there in the emotional distress related to the domestic violence in my marriage, an extended period of domestic violence, was an examination into my role in the matter. And when I went into examination of my role in the matter, that led me to discover the body of work that many of you have done when you've done my journey into miracles, which is uncovering an autopilot saboteur that is a subconscious level programming that we lodge in our subconscious, and it starts to show up. And it starts to show up in all relationships that are dysfunctional. And I saw that, okay, this situation that occurred wasn't because I was weak or pathetic and ready to be a doormat. I think it occurred because there was an autopilot saboteur that was running the show, attracting this kind of abusive behavior. And I allowed that, I accepted it because it served that autopilot saboteur programming. Now, once I got that actually it's an autopilot saboteur programming that's in my subconscious, I actually don't need to hold it there. And that led me to discover that we are all born with a unique mastery that puts us at the source of our life. Now, that the next discovery wouldn't have occurred if I had chosen to hang on to it. Once I saw, okay, what I am to absorb here is my role in the matter, I gave permission to release the rest, to excrete the rest. And I went into examining what was my role in it. And I discovered the autopilot subconscious programming. Once I got that, I literally just released and gave permission for anything that that might still be there, that remains to be excreted. And I went on to look at, okay, if I am not that person, I simply, came up with the subconscious level programming unbeknown to me at a subconscious level, and it lodged itself there, then who am I really? Given that I am a soul being and my soul being has had many, 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 many journeys, is there a particular gift or experience that is unique to me that I'm born with, that I can reclaim and that will put me at the source of my life? And that led me to the discovery of our unique source mastery. And that occurred completely 100% as a result of applying the digestion process to emotional well-being. Now, I have to say, when I began it, this digestion process, and the second time I did it, the digestion process, and I really went back into the source mastery in a big way. What I realized, I had already begun my spiritual awakening, and I thought I was pretty much sorted emotionally. But when I allowed my intuition to guide me on, are there any blocks? Are there areas in my body, in my field, that impact my emotional well-being? I then made a list of all of those, and I just worked through them one after the other. Really applying the digestion process. What is there for me to absorb? What is that nutrient? It could be a nugget of wisdom and insight. And then simply, whatever remains, give myself permission to excrete. Sometimes it's simply the energetic signature that is excreted. Other times, you actually may find yourself having the loosies for a period of time because there's so much to excrete. So let's look at the second pathway. And the second pathway is dealing with loss. Loss of a person, loss of your identity, loss of a connection, loss of a material object, loss of an energetic prowess. So many times I come across people who talk about this magical thing that they had one time in their life, that allowed them to see, that allowed them to connect, that allowed them to understand, and then now they're just not able to go there again. So the pathway of loss, the way you work with this pathway is to use that unconditional acceptance approach. And how do you work with that? So you start to acknowledge, what is the loss? A lot of the time, we don't acknowledge the loss. But if you're choosing to reclaim your emotional well-being, go through these pathways. Just ask, even if you don't feel that there is any, just ask. I'm going to work on the loss pathway. Where do I experience loss? It could be loss of opportunity, loss of time. My thing when I did this for myself, I found loss of time. And when I examined the loss of time, and I'll talk about the process first and then tell you how I dealt with it. So I go into acknowledging first, where do I experience loss? And keep asking, is there anything else? Is there anything else? Is there anything else? So the first step is simply acknowledging where you experience loss. And then you can take one loss at a time. And you examine where in your body do you feel that loss. And you're acknowledging it. Where in your body you feel it. How does that experience show up? You know, like in some areas of loss, it actually resulted in resentment in me. In others, I felt regret and sadness. When I did this process, I was well into my spiritual awakening, so I did not experience anger. But when I've done this with other people, they have certainly experienced anger when they engage with certain types of losses. So you're acknowledging how this loss is showing up. How does it make you feel? Where in your body do you feel it? Does it have a shape? Does it have a color? Is there anything else left to acknowledge? And keep asking, is there anything else left to acknowledge until there is nothing left? And that is the point. You literally stand up and declare, I unconditionally accept all that is. And that literally releases you. That's like the key that turns the lock and a doorway opens and you can go stand up and take a step forward. You go across the threshold and you start acknowledging that which does exist, that you feel appreciative about, that you feel grateful for. Everything that you acknowledge, you know, when you were acknowledging what is it that you feel loss about and where in your body, you are de-stressing. And then when you unconditionally accept what is and you cross the threshold, and then you go into acknowledging that which you do feel appreciative about, you are completely in that realm of lightness of being. And your emotional up-leveling starts to regenerate itself. So, you know, when I looked at this, you know, where do I experience loss in my life? And the thing that came up right at the top was loss of time, you know, in the sense that there's so much time's got wasted by me allowing, you know, people to take control of certain areas of my life and, you know, just allowing them to hang in there. It's wasted so much of my time. And I was like, okay, where in my body do I feel it? I felt a tightness over my chest. I also felt itching around my ankles. And I felt quite teary at, you know, so much time had passed. And what could have been. I simply acknowledged all of that. You know, and then I looked at, you know, how does it make me feel? And it was regret that I kept getting. I felt regret. There's one or two areas where there was a bit of resentment, but mostly it was regret. I didn't do anything about it other than simply acknowledge it. And kept going until, is there anything left to acknowledge? Until there was nothing left to acknowledge. That's when I did the process, exactly what I was talking to you about, where I stood up, unconditionally accepted what is, took a step forward as if I was crossing the threshold. And then I went into, what do I have that I can be appreciative about? Well, this wisdom that I was walking around thinking, oh, I'm actually pretty cool. There's no lack or there's no loss in my life. And yet there was this big burden that was there, you know, like a lead brick in my field, preventing the lightness of being. So I was like very appreciative about having discovered this process. And I was feeling really good. I mean, what happened to all those things that I regretted, that I had put away, and now they were just like gone, didn't exist. I felt that lightness of being. So I started appreciating how I feel that lightness of being. Where in my body do I feel it? What's possible now with this lightness of being? And how appreciative I was with these possibilities that I was connecting with. So you too can use it. And you can use it when there is a physical loss that you experience as well. And it could be a person. I've worked with this process with many, many people around the world during the rampant COVID times, the lockdown isolation times. I have dealt with this issue with this particular pathway, like thousands of times, in fact. And people have done it for themselves also. I even recorded, a video and an audio recording that was sent into support groups that were supporting people that had lost people during Corona. Simply using this process, dealing with loss, this pathway. David, Helene, is there anything that you see that for yourself, or any questions that arise from what I have just shared?
Well, I see that that feeling, that lightness of being, is something that we can use so many times, whether or not it's about the physical loss or any kind of loss. And it's something that have to remind ourselves about keeping our vibration high in that way, so we can acknowledge all of this and move to the next level within ourselves.
Yeah.
I think that's what I see from what you're
And
Great.
also it takes like when you're doing this process, it takes a lot of guilt. I mean, a lot of people have guilt about this
and resentment.
and
Yeah.
resentment and insecurity, which opens up a whole new avenue of releasing that kind of thinking and being.
Yeah, very true, very true.
Pathway to really getting strong again.
Yeah, and it doesn't take that long. In a matter of minutes, you're able to get to the other side. But it all begins with acknowledging that there is a loss.
That's really like mindfulness. The mindfulness, to be mindful of what's going on. It's your life. It's to pay attention to what's happening in your life and make it important.
And realizing that so much is connected to the digestion aspect.
Yes.
Organs.
So let's look at the next pathway. So the next pathway is the energy pathway. And it's about whatever you give energy to, you get more of. So when it comes to anything that distorts or causes a disruption to your emotional well-being, look at what are you giving energy to. Because whatever you're giving energy to, you get more of. If you're giving energy to blaming someone, something, you just get more and more people, situations, experiences that you can blame on. But if you're actually giving energy to accomplishment, or the energy to, like I say, how much better can it get, then that's what you get the evidence of. So when it comes to a distortion or a disruption of emotional well-being, when you use the energy pathway, you first examine, what have I got going on in my life? The good, the bad, the ugly, the beautiful. And then you go into, okay, good to know, even where you're feeling good, what you're giving energy to, because you just simply want to keep giving more energy to that. And then when you examine, where am I feeling bad, or what it seems ugly in my life, then what am I giving energy to? Because that's all that is showing up. So don't override it. Understand whatever you give energy to is what you get more of. Give energy to frustration, you get more things to be frustrated about. Give energy to disappointment, you get more things to be disappointed about. You give energy to, there's a situation that I was looking at recently where there's someone who does work with me, and he was complaining about an organization that just simply doesn't deliver on time and requires such a huge amount of follow-up. And it's frustrating for this person to follow up with this organization, and they still don't deliver on time. And at the same time, I was getting complaints left, right, and center. And I was experiencing this crazy levels of follow-up with this same person who was completely, like oblivious of how much people have to follow up with him for him to be able to deliver what he himself has committed to deliver. So there he is giving energy to, that I have to do all of this follow-up, and like getting really frustrated and agitated about it. And as a result, taking his vitality away from what he himself has committed. And then complaining about why these people don't trust him and why they are following up again and again. But you gave the deadlines. So he's in this follow-up loop, feeling totally and completely, enfranchised and frustrated with people following up with him overly, and he himself having to follow up with another organization. So this pathway, so the lot of emotional distortion and distress being experienced all the way around, simply following this one pathway, the energy pathway, he was able to see exactly what was going on. And really all that needed to be done is for him to establish very clear guidelines to this organization, or simply stop working with them. There was no need for him to have the 5th year running with the same organization that he complains about having to follow up so much. But that clarity of thinking wasn't coming because he too was behaving in ways that where follow-up was still front and center. So once he got what he was giving energy to is what he was getting more of, he just then focused on, what do I actually want more of? And if I got that, what would I be giving energy to? And he chose that change of action. And it's like all of those things that were hounding him and harassing him simply disappeared. So a lot of the time, what we give energy to is a direct reflection of our beliefs. And it is our beliefs that give us our experience of life. So then the question rises, how do we change our beliefs? It's a big, long process and could take years. It could, unless you understand what a belief is. A belief, as Abraham Hicks talks about, is simply a thought that you keep thinking. It's a thought you think a lot. So if you wish to change your belief, you choose a new thought that is more consistent with this new belief. And you think that a lot. And the beliefs automatically start to regenerate themselves. And then you start, your beliefs are the ones that determine what you give energy to. And his like the example I gave you, his thing was, I just spend all my time chasing people. And as a result, he wasn't doing what he had committed to, and other people were having to chase him. So he was spending time running away from these chasers, getting more and more stressed and distressed. And once he understood what was going on, followed this pathway, got a new thought, which is whatever it is that he requires comes to him with clarity and precision, on time, all the time. And he just started thinking that a lot whilst addressing various elements, using these pathways. Life started matching that way in which things would occur for him, because he shifted that pathway. Emotional distress was gone, and he was relaxed and calm and able to move forward with grace.
And all of your top motivators that I've heard for so many decades, the top thing that they've always said is, you become what you think about all day long.
Yeah, well, that's because that's right. That's when you think it a lot, it becomes a belief. And then your belief is what gives you your experiences of life. And you're such a projection of your beliefs. That's what happens. You become your beliefs. So, I mean, his belief had almost become that you can't trust people. Because, whatever they say, they're just not going to deliver. So why do I need to bother? And that was a vicious cycle he'd got himself trapped in. Very easily done.
And when you think like that, your heart chakra is closed.
Yeah.
And you don't trust. Not trust.
Yeah, true. So the next pathway, this is the fourth pathway, is full spectrum knowingness. So you all here already know that we are firing. When you're firing on 6 cylinders, physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, social, and environmental, all 6 of them, you are, all the 12 building blocks of your human body are perfectly in tune. They're in exactly the place that they are meant to be. So when it goes to emotional wellness, when that wellness is distorted or it is impacted in any way, so you've got this emotional thing going on, the first place you go to address the emotional distress is your physical body. But understand that you don't have to only rely on the physical to shift your state. So when you are stuck in this emotional distress state, I'm saying the first place you go to is your physical body, because simply moving interrupts the pattern that you're stuck in. So if you're lying down, sitting up, if you're indoors, going out, that shift in physical state creates a breakage in the pattern and a movement which is coming from a space of choice. That in itself transforms your mental state, and you reclaim your mental well-being, where you have the choice in the matter. You are the choice in your matter. And when that occurs, you reawaken the spiritedness of you. When that occurs, you want to interact with others. And when you do that, it activates the social dynamics that are fulfilling and nourishing and nurturing. And as you are going about all of this, you're actually up-leveling your own terrain. So you begin with a full spectrum knowingness and start actioning physically first when it comes to emotional distress. And the moment that physical switch starts to, you start implementing that switch, you enter the realm of de-stressing. And with every step you take from that point on, you are entering into a space where you're feeling more and more relaxed, composed, and centered. And that's what this particular pathway is about. The fifth pathway is a pathway of knowing there is only you. And it's not always about you. And this pathway literally gets you to understand that if something has occurred and that has taken you out, and you're not experiencing that emotional wellness, you just can't seem to feel good within yourself. Very easy to slide into what can you blame? What can you, project this lack of emotional well-being to? It could be a relationship, it could be an experience, it could be someone who let you down or whatever it may be. But all that is doing is you're depleting the power that you have to transform anything. The moment you walk this pathway and you acknowledge everything that you're feeling and you own up that you are the power in your cause and choose to be resolved about however you wish to express the joy that you want to experience in life, and you start to see where this has occurred in the past, and that way it gets anchored in reality, you're able to move forward where every step you take is de-stressing the stress out from your system. And because you've chosen that there is only you, and it's not always about you, you can focus on, putting a stop to fixing the world or fixing someone else or appeasing others. You can actually own up and reclaim your own body's desire to experience care and fulfillment. The sixth pathway, before I go there, I just want to check, is there anything that is showing up for you?
Well, it really, what you said makes so much sense for me, because I'm always I'm always listening to my body. And if I ever feel like discomfort, any kind of discomfort, like in my hips or my, groin area, or, any place in my side here, like that, I always take a moment and take some, like hold my finger in, press my finger in there deeper and deeper as I take deep breaths, and just pay attention to, because your body is always talking to you, and all you have to do is just pay attention to it, and then you can relieve the physical and at the same time the mental, the stress you feel.
Yeah, great. So let's
And
look at the sixth.
I'm just going to say one thing. The thing that comes up for me is that it's so important not to blame others and to take responsibility for whatever is going on. I mean, it's so interesting to see there are those that are constantly blaming others.
Yeah.
They don't take responsibility,
Yeah,
So-
other than the planet or the political system or whatever, Once you own that there is only you and it's not always about you, then if somebody says, no, it's nothing personal,
Right.
you know?
You don't take it personal.
Yeah, yeah. So let's look at the next pathway. This pathway is, it's a present pathway, present as in gift, like really give yourself the present that is the perfect presence to you, and it's a present of presencing your own presence. So this pathway is all about getting comfortable with yourself, within yourself. When you proactively choose to presence your presence, you're really declaring to yourselves, I count. I am worthy. And that's what this particular pathway is about. And I use the phrase, give yourself the present, is literally the gift that you consciously choose to do. So the way you walk this pathway is you make a conscious choice to give yourself permission to presence your own presence. And when you do that, allow yourself to notice at a nuance level how that experience unfolds. How does it feel to you? And what levels of mobilization get enabled when you are present in your presence? And that is what this particular pathway is about. The next pathway is about resolve. And the main thing about this particular pathway, as I'm describing it, is whatever it is that you have going on in your life, you are resolved about. So, I've had this up and down with my weight forever. Do I know how to lose weight? Yeah. Have I lost weight in the past? Yes, I have. And I keep gaining it back. That's how life has been. Well, clearly I was resolved about, the yo-yo experience. Knowing that I can lose weight if I want to, and therefore I would give myself permission and be easy about putting it back on again because I can lose it again. But what a colossal waste of time and effort. And it also meant that there was a part of me that also was resolved about that there is one area in my life that I haven't been successful in the past, which is this keeping a consistent level of weight that is in line with my body frame. But that is what I was just resolved about, my weight being my battle. Because all other battles I've already won. And, so therefore I kept the battle with food and all of that going. Consequences were massive. So understand, when whatever you have going on for you, you already are resolved about that. And that may be that you are engaging in business that isn't growing. Or you have to keep coming up with ideas that are only dependent on you bringing them forth. You're resolved about that. That's why it is occurring in this way. So when you get resolved about something, there is complete coherence with whatever your resolve is about. And that's why it starts to unfold and manifest. So once you understand that this is the pathway, and you've done all of the previous pathways, you can actually start putting in place certain systems and structures that enable you to realize what it is that you're resolved about. And even if you didn't do that, you may not realize what it is that you believe you're resolved about, but whatever you're getting, that's what you're resolved about. So over to you, David and Helene, to give us your perspective in terms of what you have gained from what I have shared and your own surmisation of what we have covered.
Well, I
Yes, yes.
So I find it very interesting that this was the second emotional part of your series, right? The second, and you in just this one session, you totally covered the whole ball of wax as far as the importance of tuning into yourself, the importance of taking that self-inventory, the importance of self-esteem, the importance of being mindful as to how you're feeling throughout the day, and how you can, take these steps. It's just a tuning in to yourself. Really, really it is. And to make yourself important enough, so that, because if you don't think you're important enough, you really have to love yourself deeply, and just like you want to be in love with in a relationship, you want to be in love with somebody, you have to really be in love with yourself, and everything all of these paths reflect that.
Yeah, very true, very true. Helene, anything that you would like to share?
He said it very well. Let me think for a second. What else can I add? Well, I think the whole thing about taking responsibility and looking at these pathways, at how you can own up to your own importance and love of self. I mean, that's really the big aspect, to know that you're worthy. You're worthy of all of this. And that's something that
That's
people,
dignity. That's dignity, honoring your own worthiness.
and honoring other people, not to be putting them down, not to be being unforgiving, from how other people are behaving, because they are going to be whoever they are, and you've got to be respectful of that and who you are.
Yeah.
Just have one last thing I just want to add in. As you go throughout the day, to take notice when you are going off center. And when you're going off center, because you become short on patience with somebody, or anger starts to build in, and all that. And if you don't do something like take one of the pathways that you were just talking about, any of those really, in that moment, and that will help to create a shift, so that the emotion will not build. And like later on, you don't want that anger to build up because somebody has just said something very nice to you, and you jump all over them because that anger has been building. So if you catch it as you go along throughout, mindful of your behavior and when you're going off course.
Yeah, very good, very good. Yes, so the pathways, I mean, what I say to everyone is follow them, do them one after the other, rather than start with the fifth pathway. As you are practicing integrating this in your life, then do it one after the other. If once you've done the digestion process, you're actually pretty clean, and then you move on to the next one, and then the next one, and then the next one, until you get to the bottom, which is, what am I actually resolved about then? At this point, you are so immersed in and being healthily well emotionally, that your own vibrant vitality would have skyrocketed. So that's the way to look at it. Do them one at a time and one after the other. And always, always be taking the next step next. It's when we take leaps ahead. When you take the next step next, you'll see very soon you will be leaping forward. But when you don't take the next step next, the first collapse comes with a whole dollop of emotional distress that makes it much harder to recover and move forward. Armed with these tools, you can turn around any situation.
Yes.
Don't
And
wait
prevent-
for something new to happen.
And prevent situations from happening.
Exactly. Practice these tools with whatever has occurred in the past so that you don't have anything in your field that is automatically, unbeknown to you, attracting that lower vibration.
Mynoo, I just want to thank you on behalf of Helene and myself for the honor of allowing us to host this evening's amazing wisdom that's come through you. So
Yes.
it's a pleasure and an honor to do that. So thank you.
Thank you. My pleasure to share all of this with you. Put it into practice. That is really the gift that I would love to see back and share how it's showing up. With that, I declare our session complete. Thank you and namaste.
I'm sick.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mynoo.
Thank you.